Hey, taxonomy, how we name stuff. This does go with evolution because a lot of the reasons why we come up with different names depends on evolutionary similarities. So taxonomy is a science of naming, describing, classifying organisms. If you've ever Googled an animal or something like that and you see this weird looking word in italics, that's its scientific name. So why do things need a specific scientific name? Why can't we just call them whatever we call them? Here's an example. What's the difference between these animals? A mountain lion, a Nittany lion, a panther, and a puma. I'm going to pause for a minute and let you think on that. Do you know what the difference is? There isn't one. They're the same animal. It just depends on where you find them. Which could get very confusing. These are just different names in English. Think of if you had animals that had different names in Spanish and French and Italian and Russian and Chinese, and all these scientists are trying to talk to each other. That could get hard. You wouldn't know what anybody's talking about. So instead, we have one system to give it a scientific name. That way everybody knows what everybody else is talking about. The guy who first came up with this idea was named Carl Linnaeus, which lived a long time ago in the 1700s. But he kind of started the system, and we've changed it since then. His system that Linnaeus came up with was called binomial nomenclature, which means two names. Binomial means two names. So it is written in Latin. That way, it's kind of similar to a lot of languages, but it's also not playing favorites with any language. You can kind of figure out what it means. I think you'll know what I mean in a second. And every living thing gets two names. So for example, humans are Homo sapiens. Those are our two names. These things you should know. These are the different ways we can classify organisms: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Domain is the most broad. Species is the most specific. So domain is really like, do you have eukaryotic cells or do you have prokaryotic cells? That's it. Kingdom is animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, protists. So it gets a little more specific. By the time you get down to genus and species, you should only have one organism with the same species name. Let's look at an example. I think that'll be easier. Here's a tiger. It is in the domain Eukarya, which means it has eukaryotic cells. It is in the kingdom Animalia, an animal. Phylum Chordata, which used to be Vertebrata, but not all vertebrates have bones, so they changed the name. But it's basically they're a vertebrate in the chordates. Class Mammalia, they are mammals. Order Carnivora, carnivores. You see how this is going? Family is Felidae, which is the cats. Genus is Panthera, which is the big cats, and the species is Tigris. So their scientific name is a combination of those last two words, Panthera tigris. Tigers are the only species that can be called Panthera tigris. Nobody else gets that name, just them. That way, if a scientist is trying to talk to another scientist and says Panthera tigris, we know, oh, that's what they're talking about. What about regular cats, house cats? You can see they have the same domain. Domain, same. Kingdom, same. Phylum, class, order, family. So they're the same down to this area because they're both eukaryotes, both animals, both vertebrates, both mammals, they're both carnivores, and they're both cats. So that makes sense that they'd be similar down to that where it says family. But tigers and house cats break off after that. Felis catus is the scientific name for your house cat, the kinds you'd keep in your house as pets. Panthera is for the bigger cats. So like there's Panthera tigris for the tiger. There's Panthera leo for the lions. Kind of get how it goes. What this shows you, when you group them like this and you compare the two, The more names they have in common, the more similar they are. So these two are very closely related because they're in the same family. Let's compare a cat and a dog. Still both eukaryotes, still animals, still chordates, still mammals, still carnivores, but once you hit family, they break off. Dogs are in the family Canidae, which would fit all of the pet dogs, plus all of like the wolves, coyotes, things like that would be in Canidae. Felis catus over here, Canis lupus over here. So they are close, but not super close. I don't know if I have another example. Now we'll come back to that in a second. If we did humans, we are still the same domain, eukaryotes. We're still animals, still chordates. We are still mammals, but humans fit in the order primates. So we would stop being similar right here. If we did jellyfish, I don't know, they would still be domain kingdom is the same because they're still animals, but they're no longer chordates. They're not vertebrates. They'd have a different phylum. If we did a tree, they wouldn't be animals anymore, but they'd still be eukarya. You don't have to memorize any of these, by the way. You should memorize domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. This thing from back here. But you don't have to know any specific organism. The point of comparing them like this is saying that the more names they have in common, the closer they are in relation. So a tiger and a cat would be very closely related. Tiger and a dog, a little less related. Tiger and cat, a little less related. If you threw in humans, it's a little less. So the more names you have in common, the more closely related you are. And if you see two organisms that have almost all the names the same, that must mean they're very, very closely related. So back in the day, when Linnaeus, this guy, was figuring out who's related to who, it was all based on what they look like. It was basically like, are you a plant or are you not a plant? That was basically all it was. But today, knowing all the science that we know now, we can see what they look like, what they act like, their DNA, and lots of things we can use. We are still discovering organisms today. Why do we care about this? All the organisms have been named. No, they haven't. Especially if you're going after insects. A bunch of them have not even been found yet. They don't have names. So if you find a new organism that doesn't have a name yet, you can name it whatever you want. You can see that one on the left there is named after Harry Potter. The one in the middle is named after Pokemon. And the one on the right, Beyonce, is its species name. It's named after Beyonce. And you can literally name them whatever you want. Now, of course, you have to check its DNA. You got to compare it to others, see who it's related to, make sure nobody's already found it and named it something else. But if that's all checked out, name whatever you want. There you go. There's a lot of really neat ones online. You can Google scientific names based on celebrities, scientific names based on Harry Potter characters or whatever. There's tons of them. What we are going to do with this information is see, now that we know who's related to who and who fits where, what can we do with it? How can we use this information? That'll be coming up later this week. For now, that's it with classification. See you next time.